The hang 10 is the holy grail of longboarding, and in this session I try 3 different approaches to see what actually works and discuss where we often go wrong, all to help the hang 10s of you guys and everyone joining us today. If you like what we're doing here, please feel free to subscribe or check out the links below. Let's get into it. Alright, so the waves are going to be pretty tricky today, but I think this will be a good opportunity because, as we know, bad waves typically accentuate our flaws and they do demand precision. So whereas if the conditions were really good, and even though I was making some mistakes, the conditions were covering this up, I think today it's really going to let me know where I'm going wrong. And I also think that if I do get some really good hang 10s today, then it'll provide a great opportunity and some great examples for you guys to have a look and see what this looks like in these conditions and how you can apply that to your surfing in your sessions as well. Because as many of you say in the comments, and I can definitely resonate with this, the conditions aren't always perfect, and if you're trying to go out and practice hang 10s or other moves, then sometimes it can be different or difficult when you're watching people surfing perfect point breaks, and it's pretty rare that we might get some, perfect point break-esque type conditions. So hopefully we'll be able to see how this works in the tricky conditions and then translate to your own surfing to improve your hang 10s as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to give this a go and see what we learn. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I tried 3 different approaches to the hang 10 out here today, which we're going to run through now, to show you which is the most effective for your surfing. With the final method, I definitely get some of the best hang 10s of the session, so let's dive straight in. The first method is what I call the generalist approach. This is what I would say 99% of the surfers use to improve in a certain domain of their surfing. The generalist approach is where we go out surfing with one, or more often than not, a few to many things that we're trying to work on in our surfing. We do this, and whilst we have an idea in our mind of what we're going to work on, there's no plan in place. Now, keep in mind, I wasn't planning on using this for this session. I was really just trying to get out there and get some hang 10s. But throughout the session, I pulled myself up on this mistake that I tell so many people to try and avoid where possible. With this approach, I found my overall wave riding was pretty good, because I was taking my same old normal approach to the wave, which didn't model itself around getting great hang 10s. Instead, I was just surfing and I guess crossing my fingers that some great hang 10 sections would come my way. But in these conditions, those sections weren't just offering themselves up. And as you can see from the session so far, there haven't been any hang 10s ridden yet. And in retrospect, I'm glad about this, because it was good to reflect on out there in the water and push me towards the next strategy. So from starting the session, having some fun but with pretty much 0 success in any real hang 10s, I thought about what I needed to do and came to the second strategy. Given the waves were closing out quickly and the sections were tricky to find, I thought I needed to capitalise on the sections whenever they presented themselves. We can call this approach the now or never approach. I often use this for my surfing if I'm hesitating on a new manoeuvre or worrying about all of the stars aligning, like having the right wave, the right section, the right balance, and so on, before I even try the manoeuvre. And this method definitely helps to defeat hesitation. Today, the idea was whenever I saw a critical section to just go for it and ignore the consequences of potentially falling. In the tricky conditions, however, the sections were flattening as soon as they were popping up, and because of the chop, rushing things and being less balanced was proving to be too difficult. This can be a great strategy, especially to get some good solid repetitions in, but it does have a high risk, high reward element to it, where we may luck out and lock into some epic critical hang 10s, but our strategy and technique can be somewhat compromised. At this point, it was back to the drawing board, after a few waves of recognising that this wasn't the right approach either. But this is where things took a nice turn. The last approach, which proved to be most successful, is where we have our eyes on the prize, narrowing our focus on hang 10s and hang 10s only, where one thing matters. What this really involves is not even attempting to hit the nose unless you're extremely confident it can hold you for a hang 10. Why this approach has been so good for me and the surfers I take through in the past is it changes the way we perceive the wave. Whereas we have certain habits and patterns we're accustomed to looking for on the wave, this is a useful disruptor, which gets us to look for a section we may not have had at the forefront of our minds typically. That being the section not to hang 5, not just to tap the nose, but to hang 10. hang 10 sections are different to typical nose ride sections. We have to be locked in and can't settle for being out towards the shoulder. For that reason, I ended up using a weaving method where I would constantly cut back towards the pocket, patiently waiting for the potential section to sit up and lock in the critical hang 10. With this approach, everything becomes simplified also. Not worrying about turns or tricks, which also acts to smooth and calm down our surfing, leading to a relaxed approach. With this method, I was finally able to lock in some better hang 10s. Nothing out of this world, but definitely some that I was happy to walk away with. The real difference with this approach was waiting. Waiting for the section, waiting for the right wave also, rather than what we do in the generalist approach by taking any wave and not thinking about catching a wave which is conducive to the maneuver we want to be performing. Now make sure you stick around for a one-on-one deep dive as to why this is so important for your surfing and how you can use this to improve your hang 10s. Alrighty guys, so tricky session, a bit trickier than I thought. I was expecting there'd be some waves out there, but it was a little bit few and far between. But I think it was really useful. Again, I didn't really go out there with a big plan as to how I was going to focus on things. It was more or less just figuring it out and trying to use the same principles that I'd applied through teaching people with my history of coaching, and trying to apply that to myself and how I was, I suppose, going about my hang 10s. So starting off out there, just trying to get some good hang 10s using that very generalist approach. I find that this is what we do for the most part when we are learning a new maneuver, and this is essentially our default unless we know to correct this, because we go out and approach the wave the exact same way that we're used to, which isn't the best way to make sure that we're pushing ourselves outside our comfort zone. It's not the best way to make sure that we're going to be landing this new maneuver or really testing this out, getting the hang 10, because we're not looking for the same things with a hang 10 as we are for a hang 5, as we spoke about earlier. With a hang 5, we can be further out in the pocket, and more or less, we're going to want to be out in the pocket because this is where we're more balanced and we have less risk of falling. But with our hang 10s, we do need to be tied into the pocket, and this is where our more specific and eye on the prize approach can really come into play, which we'll get to soon. With the now or never approach, I do think this is really useful, especially if you're trying to get past a little barrier in your own surfing. If you're hesitating, say could be for the cross step, could be for a particular type of turn, in this instance the hang 10, which is a massive one, taking that second foot up and making sure you are hanging 10, because we might fall, and 90% of the time if we're trying a new maneuver like this, we will fall. So it's very normal, and we've got to make sure that we're getting used to this. And so to do this, the now or never approach can be really good. It's also a great way if we're going to be moving more quickly on the board, maximizing and really utilizing this to make sure that we're getting the most of these sections when they're a little bit few and far between as well. But today I just didn't think the conditions were necessarily the most conducive for this, which does bring us into that final one, the eyes on the prize approach. This came to my attention for my own surfing when I was trying to learn to hang 10 better. I was trying to make sure that I was getting into better sections, and it really just made sense to me that I would try and neglect everything else whilst I had my eye on this one maneuver that I did want to make sure I was getting better at. So I've used this a few times with people I've coached as well, and it does have a really good effect. For that reason, as we spoke about before, we're actually looking for something different. We're making sure we're being patient and we're looking for the right section to open up, which will affect our approach on the wave as well. We'll be ducking and weaving back into the pocket, waiting for something to stand up. And with this as well, we're going to get used to cross-stepping in more critical sections because we're bringing ourselves back, and it just has a really nice flow-on effect. Of course, we've still got to commit the same as we do in the now or never approach, and we've still got to make sure that we've got all those fundamentals down pat as well in terms of positioning on the wave, being able to cross-step up and back very confidently, so you can't forget that stuff. But in terms of making sure we can hang 10, this is a really good way to do it. Think about the hang 10, eye off those sections, eye off the right waves that are going to most likely allow you to get to a hang 10. And this is where we're going to get our repetition, because as we said before, with the generalist approach, we're just going to be surfing the way we normally do, which we know doesn't lend ourselves to doing something we've never done before. So for this, I'd love to know how it goes for you. If you can write down in the comments below how it goes, it'd be really cool, and I'd like to see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, or if you're coming a little bit unstuck with some of it, why that is those as well. Always happy to have a chat down there in the comments. I think we'll leave it there for today. Hope you guys are getting waves, and we'll catch you in the next one.